teachers are important, and I don't think I need to convince you about that. But because teachers are so important, this study focuses on two key objectives. The first one is to know teachers' characteristics and perceptions in Latin America. And the second is to understand how these characteristics and perceptions relate to student learning. This study addresses 10 research questions related to different topics, including teacher training, working conditions in the schools, and teacher satisfaction. To answer these questions, we use information from the TERCEST study, which is a large-scale student assessment program of the UNESCO OREALC Office for Latin America. TERCEST was administered in 2013 in 15 countries and one state, the Mexican state of Nuevo León, and it used nationally representative samples of students at grades 3 and 6. Students answered mathematics, language and science tests, as well as a questionnaire. Students' parents, their teachers, and school directors also answered questionnaires, allowing to collect the background information. The results that I'm going to show you today present the data from the teacher questionnaire and the relationship to the mathematics result of the third grade students. In the following slides, I'm going to show you a series of bar graphs. For each country, a bar will show the percentage of students that have a given characteristic. For example, the percentage of students whose teachers have a teaching certificate. And in this example, we can see that 85% of the students have a teacher with a teaching certificate. We are going to add to this graph the mathematics scores of these students. The pink symbol is going to show the mathematics score of the students whose teachers have the characteristics. In this example, the students whose teachers have a teaching certificate got 750 points in the mathematics test. In yellow, I'm going to show you the mathematics score of the students whose teachers do not have the characteristic. When the pink symbol points upwards, that means that there is a positive and statistically significant difference in favor of the students that have the characteristic. And on the other side, when the difference is negative and statistically significant, you will see the symbol pointing downwards. When there are not statistically significant differences, you will see a symbol like this. And in some cases, you will see that you will not see the yellow symbol because there were very few students that do not have the characteristic under analysis. And in those cases, we don't show the mathematics score of those students. Let's go to the results now. Question number 1. What kind of pre-service training do teachers have? In Latin America, there is consensus among the countries that all teachers should have a teaching certificate from a university or professional training institution. Therefore, TERCE asked the teachers if they had such a certificate. This graph shows the percentage of students taught by a teacher with a teaching certificate. The percentage varies from 99% in Chile to 20% in Guatemala. For 3 countries, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Guatemala, it's still a challenge to ensure that most of their teachers have such a certificate. Now the key question is, when teachers have a teaching certificate, do their students learn more? This graph shows us the mathematics scores of the students taught by a certified teacher. And now the graph also shows in yellow the mean mathematics score of the students whose teachers do not have a certificate. If we count the number of pink triangles pointing upwards, we see that in 8 countries, students taught by a teacher with a certificate achieve higher mathematics scores than students taught by a teacher without a certificate. Now, the expectation here will be to see triangles pointing upwards in all the countries, showing a clear relationship between teacher certification and student learning. The fact that this is not the case indicates that probably the low quality of pre-service teacher training in the region is not making an impact in student learning. Let's go to the second research question. Do teachers have opportunities for professional development? Education quality requires teachers that can learn continuously, that can update their knowledge in the subject areas that they teach, and that they can update their pedagogical skills. Therefore, there's a ask to teachers if they attended any training course in mathematics in the last 2 years. In the region, around 1/3 of the students are taught by a teacher with a recent training in mathematics. This percentage varies from 52% in the Dominican Republic to around 9% in Mexico. Again, the key question is, when teachers do have training, do their students learn more? Now the graph shows in pink the mathematics scores of the students whose teachers have a training, and in yellow the scores of the students whose teachers do not have a training. If we count the number of pink triangles pointing upwards, we see that in only 4 out of the 16 countries, the students attain higher scores when their teachers have a training. Again, this result should make us suspicious, at least, about the low quality of the in-service teacher training in the region. Question number 3. Do teachers receive teaching support from their school leaders? Effective schools have strong pedagogical leaderships. That is, school directors or their teams do things like observing their teachers teach in the classroom, review their teachers' class plans, and provide feedback to teachers. They ask the teachers if they receive pedagogical support from the school leadership. Most of the teachers said yes. Around 3/4 of the students in the region are taught by a teacher who receives pedagogical support from the school leadership. The country with the lowest percentage is Colombia, where up to 50% of the students are taught by a teacher who receive pedagogical support. And these are good news. Now, how does this correlate with students' learning? Against our expectations, the result shows that there is not a clear relationship between pedagogical support and student learning. In fact, there are only 7 out of the 16 countries with a triangle pointing upwards, indicating that students taught by teachers who receive pedagogical support learn more. In all the other countries, there is not a clear relationship between receiving pedagogical support and student learning. There are several possible explanations for these results. 1. The poor quality of the pedagogical support provided by the teachers. Maybe we need to change that kind of support. Another explanation is that in several countries, teachers who receive more support work in lower income schools. and therefore the relationship with learning is obscure. And a third explanation is that teachers who actually need more support because of their student low performance are the ones who in fact are getting it. And that this is good, but this again obscures the relationship between pedagogical support for the teachers and their students' learning. Question number 4. Is there a classroom environment that supports learning? For students who learn, there must be a positive learning environment where teachers and students work together, respect and trust one each other. However, this graph shows us that only around half of the students attend classes with a positive learning environment, according to their teachers' responses to the teacher questionnaire. If we add to the graph the mathematics scores of the students, now we can clearly see a lot of pink triangles pointing upwards. In 14 out of the 16 countries, the students that attend classes with a positive learning environment learn more than the students who attend classes with a negative environment. There are only 2 exceptions, Ecuador and Honduras. It is sad to say, but the poorest students are usually the ones that attend classes with a poor learning environment, and this poses an equity challenge in the region. Let's go to question number 5. Is there violence in the schools? School violence is a growing concern in the region. School violence is a threat to the physical and psychological well-being of the students, and it certainly does not go together with school quality. This graph shows us the percentage of students that attend violent schools where students insult, hit, or harm one each other. On average, 16% of the students in the region attend violent schools, and this percentage varies from 3% in Ecuador to 32% in Uruguay. When we add to the graph the mathematics scores of the students who attend violent and non-violent schools, we see that there is a certain relationship with learning. In fact, in 9 out of the 16 countries, there is a triangle pointing upwards, indicating that students who attend non-violent schools learn more than students attending violent schools. Question number 6. Are teachers satisfied with their job? Teachers' satisfaction is important for teachers to do their best when teaching in their classrooms. And it's also important for retaining teachers in the teaching profession. Teachers in the region are very satisfied with their job, and these are good news. They like to work in the schools, and they feel that their work is valued. In all the countries, over 80% of the students are taught by a teacher who is satisfied with their job. However, in only half of the countries, there is a clear relationship between job satisfaction and students' learning. As you can see, there are only 8 triangles pointing upwards, 8 out of the 16 countries. This result suggests that high levels of satisfaction may be necessary, but are not a sufficient condition to improve learning levels. Now, a different question is if we ask if teachers are satisfied with their salaries. To improve teachers' salaries is one of the main demands of the teachers in the region. Teachers' salaries affect the social status of the teachers and their capacity to attract and retain good teachers in the classroom. Teacher satisfaction with their salaries is low. On average in the region, only 37% of the teachers are satisfied with their salaries. This percentage varies from 60% in Guatemala to only 10% in Argentina. When we add to the graph the mathematics scores of the student, there are 12 out of the 16 countries with the triangle pointing upwards, indicating that students learn more when their teachers are satisfied with their salaries. In some countries, these differences in learning are mediated by the socioeconomic level of the students. This is the case when teachers that are satisfied with their salaries tend to teach higher income students. Question number 8. What are teachers' expectations regarding the education level of their students would reach? To learn, students must feel that they can go far in their studies and that the social contexts are not a limitation for moving forward. When teachers have high expectations toward their students, it's more likely that students will have high expectations for themselves too, and will try to meet those expectations. Let's ask the teachers if they expect most of their students to go far in their studies, studying in a university or post-secondary training institution. This graph shows us that only around 50% of the students have a teacher who expects them to study at a university or post-secondary education institution. This percentage varies from 85% in the Dominican Republic to 25% in Guatemala. When we add the math scores of the students whose teachers have or not high expectations, we see a triangle pointing upwards in 15 out of the 16 countries. The only exception is the Dominican Republic. This strong and positive relationship is in part mediated by the socioeconomic level of the students. Why? Because teachers who have higher expectations also tend to teach students from higher socioeconomic levels. And because socioeconomic levels and learning levels are so strongly related, then expectations and learning levels tend to be strongly related too. Question number 9. What's the performance level of students from the same classrooms? To promote quality and equity in education, it is important to know the performance level of the students that are taught in the same classrooms and by the same teachers. There's a report result in 4 performance levels. For instance, if a student got 600 points in the math test, he will be classified in performance level 1. This level corresponds to students that can order numbers, identify basic geometric shapes, identify missing elements in simple sequences, and read explicit data in tables and graphs. On the other side, if a student got 850 points, she will be classified in performance level 4. This level corresponds to students that can solve more complex problems with natural numbers and geometric figures, and can solve problems involving comparisons and conversions of measurements. It is important to note that performance level 4 is really the level that corresponds to the curricular expectations of many of the countries participating in TERCE. Let me show you here an example of a question from the test that corresponds to performance level 1. That is, this is an item that most of the students in performance level 1 could answer correctly. Which one of these flags has a circle and a triangle? And we can see that the right answer is flag number 3, option C. Let's see now an item from performance level 4. Elsa has the following bags with seeds. She needs 100 seeds to make a necklace. How many more bags does she need? We can see that Elsa already have 2 bags with 20 seeds, and to have 100 seeds she will need 5 bags overall. She already has 2, so she needs 3 more bags. The right answer is A. Now, let's go back to our question. What is the performance level of students from the same classrooms? This graph shows us how students' performance vary within a typical class in each one of the participating countries. That is, it shows how performance level varies among classmates that are taught by the same teachers and that share a similar socioeconomic background. In all the countries, a typical class includes students from all 4 performance levels. It includes students with just the basic mathematics skills up to students that can solve more complex mathematics problems. In a typical class, around half of the students are in level 1, 25% in level 2, 20% in level 3, and the rest in level 4. And again, let's keep in mind that level 4 is the one that really corresponds to the curricular expectations of the countries. These results show us that there are huge differences in the learning levels within the same classrooms, and therefore it is critical to focus our attention in the classrooms. If we want all the students to learn more, no matter where they are in their learning trajectories, teachers need to use pedagogies that recognizes these differences in learning, pedagogies that are well fitted to their student need, to their student learning levels. And the last question, question number 10. What do teachers think about student assessment in the classroom? Student assessment is a core activity for teachers. Assessment that effectively inform teaching and learning processes can make a difference in student learning. That's why classroom assessment is so important. There's asked the teachers to indicate if they agree with a series of statements about student assessment. This graph shows, for all the countries taken together, the percent of students whose teachers agree with each statement. For instance, 91% of the students are taught by a teacher who agree that the main function of the assessment is to follow or document students' progress so as to modify teaching activities. This pedagogical function of the assessment is the foundation of formative assessment or assessment for learning. Effectively used, it can boost student learning. Other assessment functions are to know student learning level so as to grade them. And a third one, the main function of assessment, is to have objective evidence of students' learning levels to communicate with parents. We can see here again that most of the teachers agree with these statements about the functions of assessment. The following questions refer to different resources for assessing students. The observation of students' daily performance is a useful and functional resource to assess student progress, 99% of agreement. Individual tasks are useful and functional resources to assess students, 94%, and closed questions or multiple choice questions are useful resources to assess, 71% of agreement. And the last two questions show us somehow kind of opposite result, and maybe there is something here that teachers need to work and to solve. The statement says, different assessments are required according to students' levels or degree of maturity. And the last one, all students should answer the same test on content taught. We can see that there is 85% of agreement for the first statement, but at the same time, 52% of agreement with the last one. And these two statements are somehow opposite, and nevertheless, we see this kind of result. Okay. Let's go now to the conclusions. What can we learn from this result? Well, students seem to learn more when they attend non-violent schools, when they attend schools with positive classroom environments, when their teachers have high expectations towards their future studies, and when their teachers are satisfied with their salary. And all these are important findings. And these findings, you can see them too at the 6th grade. Now, what are the key challenges? One key challenge is that all teachers should have a teaching degree in Latin America and the Caribbean. We see that this is still a pending task for some of the countries in our region. Another challenge is to improve the quality of pre-service and in-service professional development. We saw that there is not a clear relationship between training and student learning, and there are reasons for that. And maybe one of the key reasons is that we have quality problems there. The current debate about teaching training indicates that there is a need to change the focus from a training that is lecture type, that has an emphasis on education theory, to a training that allows for discussion among peers, that is contextualized in the schools, and that allows for direct observations of what happens in the classroom. That is, we need to change the focus of the training for something that looks like in this picture to something that looks more like in this picture. Finally, I would like to end with the challenge of how to serve students that are at different stages of their learning processes. I quote a teacher reflecting on this challenge. I hope that someday we could work with all the results of our students in the school, and not just with the average results, knowing that the real achievement gap is here in my classroom. We can see this learning gap in all the countries participating in TERCE. In a typical classroom, there are students that reach and exceed the curricular expectations, together with students that are just grasping the basics. Schools must recognize these differences in learning levels and must provide their students with learning opportunities that are appropriate for them. In doing so, we will be approaching the goals of quality and equity in education for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, María José, for this interesting participation and for your presentation. I would like to open the floor for questions and comments from the participants. And while we wait for their questions on the chat, I would like to ask you a few questions. I would like to start with the fact that violence is considered to be a problem that causes increasing concern in the region, meaning Latin America and the Caribbean, and that the school violence, it's an important issue that can affect, as you showed in the presentation, the results in the students' assessment. But it was interesting to see, and I had the opportunity to read the report, and there were certain cases such as Panama, Nicaragua, and Brazil, where students that were teachers who report higher levels of violence in schools that serve students of higher socioeconomic status are students that tend to have a better academic performance. I would like to know from your own experience, and from the uh, assessment that from the study that you conducted with OREALC UNESCO, what are these examples of countries that are developing programs to reduce violence in the schools, and that are also tackling this important issue not only in public schools but also in private schools and in higher income students?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, I think the first stage to tackle this problem is to raise awareness about this. And we can see more and more information about school bullying, especially related to the uses of technology. And this is becoming a strong issue. It's a strong issue in Chile. I see it constantly in the news in the US, and I'm pretty sure it's a strong issue in other Latin American countries and in the Caribbean. And this seems to be a phenomenon that somehow is changing the shape from a kind of traditional type of bullying to a e-bullying, with the uses of pictures to make fun of students and things like that, and including teachers too. So it's a kind of new phenomenon that we need to tackle. In Chile, there is more and more concern from the Minister of Education to address this issue. I will say at least raising awareness. I really am not, I don't know about specific programs that are tackling the issue. And I think that this is something that all the teacher training institutions should address, because violence, as we saw in the result, is correlated with learning. And we also saw that it's school climate is correlated with violence. So any intervention that is focused on reducing violence and providing a more positive classroom environment for the student is important. And this result also raised some issues, especially from the perspective of a positive classroom environment for learning, because it's really the students that need it the most, that is the poorest students in the region, that suffer the most from negative classroom environment, and in many cases also from more school violence. Even though in some countries we can see kind of an opposite pattern, where there is more violence in more affluent schools and students.
Thank you, Maria Jose, for your answer. The other question I had was concerning the role of families in the development of the skills of students to be better in these school tests. And I was wondering, from the policymaking point of view, how the role of not only families but also principals and other actors in the educational community play within this context of school assessment.
Yeah, well, families are a key player in student learning and education quality, and the same as school principals. Terce asked the families to complete a background questionnaire too, and the school leaders also completed a separate school questionnaire. In this study, I just focus on the data from the teacher questionnaire. Therefore, I don't have information here about the families, but it will be definitely interesting to look at. But what we know from research from other assessment is that families can support their students doing very important and simple things, like, for instance, making sure that the students have a desk or a table to do the homework, that the TV is not turned on while the student is working on the homework, that the parents check the homework of the students, that the parents attend and participate in the schools. So those are key little things, little big steps that the parents can take in order to support learning. Regarding school leaderships and the school principals, we saw here the key role that school principals may play in terms of providing pedagogical support for the students. The effective school literature shows us clearly that when principals are involved in supervising their teachers, providing them with feedback, with observing their classes, teachers can teach better and students can learn more. So that's something important to address. The tertiary result didn't show a clear relationship between pedagogical support by the school leaderships and teachers, but this is more likely the consequence of maybe a poor pedagogical support, and there is room there for improvement through teacher policies and interventions.
Thank you, María José. So to continue with this discussion, I would like to also ask you this other question. So there's consensus in terms of the need that we have to have well-trained teachers and motivated teachers too. And you showed us that having teacher professional training and a continuous training is important for their job satisfaction and for their professional advancement. But how can this improve in itself, how these opportunities of professional development can change the teaching practice of the teachers? Maybe from your own experience and from the possibilities that you had conducting this study, did you identify certain patterns where these practices within the classroom were changing once there was a policy towards the professional advancement of teachers put in place?
Yeah, the research on teacher training shows that to change teacher behavior in the classroom, you need to provide a training that is very focused on the contents that the teachers need to learn, that is very focused on the pedagogical skills that teachers need to have, and to provide that training ideally in the classroom, in the schools. For pre-service teacher training, you need to do that in the time that the teachers prepare to be teachers in the schools. The research on teacher training shows that providing a lecture to teachers is not effective, that teaching education theory is not effective. You need to do a training that is much more closer to the teacher practices, and to provide a training that allows teachers to reflect on what they are doing and to see the relationship between their pedagogy and student learning. So here I foresee that there is probably the main challenge in terms of policies for the government and for teacher training institutions, that the focus on how teachers are taught needs to be changed. The programs that are effective, also providing good training, provide a very scripted approach with very clear and explicit guidelines on, for instance, how to teach and what to do with students that are at performing level 1, just trying to understand a basic mathematics concept, and what to do with students that are at a much more advanced learning level. You need to provide differentiated type of learning opportunities for those two students. So teachers, they need to understand that they cannot teach to the average students. That's not going to be effective. And teacher training institutions have a key role in making this change.
That's right, Maria Jose. Indeed, I found a quote that I would like to share with you here and with all the audience from the report you developed jointly with Adriana Viteri. You said in the conclusions part that the current debate on teacher training shows the most effective training for changing teaching practices is collaborative and contextualized professional learning. This means that you'll need to create like collaboration among teachers, professional networks, and learning communities, work groups, precisely to change that teaching practice within the classroom. I was wondering if from your experience, and once again conducting this study, maybe if you found examples of countries that are already promoting this kind of collaboration among teachers.
Oh, this is such a hard topic because unfortunately, well, for good and for the bad, teacher training is a very decentralized activity that is offered by many autonomous or semi-autonomous teacher training institutions. And therefore, many times the ministries of education do not have enough leverage to make changes in the curriculum of teacher training institutions. So if there is not that kind of cultural change, it's hard to make a real change in the way things happen. Now, good examples of what is going on in terms of teacher training, I would say that the Escuela Nueva in Colombia use an excellent approach in terms of providing teachers with a clear model on how to teach in a very deprived context, how to use the resources that are available in the communities, how to involve the parents so that they can support teaching, and how to involve the school leadership so that they can supervise and monitor what the student and the students have to learn and what the teachers have to teach. So that I would say it's a good example of a teacher training approach, where there is evidence that that Escuela Nueva has been very successful in boosting student learning.
Thank you, María José. So I think we're reaching, the end of this session, unless our participant Dalila has another question for us to discuss in this question and answer space. If not, I would like to share with the participants that the materials that were used for this webinar will be uploaded to our COTEC website on the link that you see on the screen, and you could access there the synopsis, the PowerPoint presentation, and also the recording of this webinar. If Maria Jose, do you have any other comments before we finish this session?
No, thank you very much for the invitation.